Hello, everybody. Welcome into another episode of the Penn State 365 podcast. The college football playoff field for 2024 is officially set, and the Penn State Nittany Lions are going to be hosting a first-round playoff matchup at Beaver Stadium as the number 6 seed. They'll be hosting the number 11 seed SMU Mustangs out of the ACC on December 21st at 12 p.m. Game will be televised on TNT. Nittany Lions, number 6 seed, but do finish number 4 in the rankings themselves, dropping just one spot from their Big Ten Conference Championship game spot of number 3. So, gentlemen, let's start with that Big Ten Championship game on Saturday night. Penn State does fall to Oregon 45-37 in what was a shootout that I don't think anybody really expected. And I talked about this on my initial thoughts last night. I'm sure Marty may have said similar on his post game show for us. And Anthony, we'll get your thoughts here first. But despite the loss, and obviously a frustrating loss because Penn State had its opportunities to win that game, I think it's a loss that you come out of that as a Penn State fan, and you have to kind of feel good about not even kind of, you have to feel good about where this team is at, offensively especially, heading into the college football playoffs. Because if that's the offense that shows up in the postseason, and assuming the defense performance is a little bit of a mirage, and I don't think anybody else besides Oregon could really do that to this defense, Penn State has a really good shot of making a run here, and their path for a run is favorable as well. But just give me your thoughts on last night's loss. Sorry.
To me, like you said, it was a tale of two performances, both offensively and defensively. Like you said, I completely agree that I truly believe Oregon is the only team that can do that to Penn State's defense. When was the last time we saw that happen to a Penn State defense? It's probably been years since we saw maybe Ole Miss last year, but that was a depleted defense.
It's been a while. It's been a while.
Like at a full strength Penn State defense, it's been a long time. That just shows the strength of this Oregon offense and this Oregon team in general. I truly believe they are the best team in the country. But on the flip side of that, Penn State's offense showed up in a big way and really counteracted the defensive performance. Drew Aller, he made his mistakes, but I thought he played really well overall. The running backs were absolutely fantastic. I wish they would have leaned on them a little bit more. But Drew Aller really made some big-time throws, some NFL throws. But you see the maturation. You still see he has a little bit of a ways to go. But like you said, if this offense shows up against SMU and beyond, if they beat SMU, they could absolutely make a run here.
You talk about the defense last time. It looks like the last time was probably you looking at that 2022 Michigan team and 2022 Ohio State teams. Penn State gave up 44 to Ohio State, 41 to Michigan. Their only 2 losses that season. But obviously that Ohio State game kind of similar to last night in a little bit of a shootout capacity. Though I think Penn State's offense performance last night was even better than that game, of course. Marty, what's your thoughts last night quickly? Like Anthony said, that offense was terrific last night. Defense, not so much.
Yeah, Anthony took a lot of how I feel. Last time in the post-game show with Greg, we talked about it, and I said, hey, this Penn State defense, they've earned the right, respect, whatever it is, to chalk that up to an aberration last night, right? You don't expect that to happen again. Had you told me going into the game Penn State was going to get 518 yards, average 8.3 a carry, and score 37, I said they're winning every time. Yeah. And, we'll get into this. Them losing was probably a blessing in disguise with the way this bracket fell. But, yeah, if that offense shows up in the playoff with what you expect from this defensive line, what you expect from this secondary, I think there's a real shot that if the offense they got last night is what shows up against SMU and then against Boise, and if you win that against either Georgia or Notre Dame, they've got a legitimate shot to get a rematch with Oregon in the national championship game. Like, that's not outlandish to think if the offense we saw last night shows up. So, I think if you're, and I said this on our post-game show last night, if you're a Penn State fan, you've got to be more even though they lost, more optimistic about this team's chances of making a run and potentially winning a national championship than you were going into that game. because we saw everything we wanted to see all year from this offense. And I think what's very important is the running backs. They've definitely taken some lumps this year. They both look healthy. This offensive line came out against maybe the best front seven in college football and pushed them around all night long with two healthy, borderline elite running backs behind them. That'll win you a lot of football games.
Yeah, absolutely. And that was what I was going to bring up is one, your national comments, national championship. Well, I agree that Penn State has a chance here to make a run for a national championship, which is, I didn't feel that way 48 hours ago, maybe. But after what I saw last night, I feel like looking at what their path would be, if you get to a national championship game and you face an Oregon, yeah, you may lose that game again, but when it's one game, anything's possible, right? And I think the Penn State chances of getting to that national championship game, are they're not outstanding, but they're pretty good. I mean, let's be honest, and we're going to talk about this in a minute. They should win their first two matchups. They should win their first two matchups by multiple scores. It's going to come down, if they make a run here, it should come down to that semifinal matchup, and we'll get into that. But you bring up the offensive line. That's why I feel Penn State can make a run, because that is an offensive line of performance. I mean, when was the last time we saw Penn State's offensive line truly maul a defensive front seven like that? I mean, and an elite one too. That was like Marty said, maybe the best front seven all of college football, and Oregon had no answers to that offensive line. That was an incredible performance last night. So I think we all feel the same about Penn State. Tough loss, but like Anthony said, or Marty said, they may have come out actually with the better path here for a potential national championship. And let's get into that path. Let me bring up the college football bracket here. 1 second. But let's start with this opening round game against SMU, guys. What is your initial thoughts on the Nittany Lions facing the Mustangs to start this one, this playoff run potentially? Anthony, we'll go to you.
Yeah, I mean, if you're Penn State, you couldn't have asked for a better draw, like Marty said. It really could be a blessing in disguise, because, trust me, that was a big talking point on ESPN today when they were doing their selection show. And Reese Davis probably brought it up at least 25 times, if I was counting it. But end of the day, Penn State gets SMU to start. I think they're an explosive offense. I think they have a really dynamic quarterback. But if you just look at the rosters, Penn State absolutely has the talent advantage pretty much across the board. So ideally, yes. And you get them at home in December in an environment that, Penn State's probably more used to, much colder than Dallas. But, yeah, if you're Penn State and you see that bracket right there, you cannot help but feel like, we might honestly the best path of any team in the playoff right now.
Sure, and before I hand off to Marty, just a quick look at the other opening round games. 8 seed Ohio State versus 9 seed Tennessee. Number 7 Notre Dame versus number 10 Indiana. Number 5 Texas versus number 12 Clemson. Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, Arizona State get the byes. Marty, we talked about this in a group chat already, but I feel like the big difference in this opening round game, and something we also just talked about, could be in the trenches. I can't see SMU in this game being able to hold up against Penn State's offensive line or Penn State's defensive line for 4 quarters. And if Penn State is able to run the ball like they did on Saturday against Oregon, which I think they're going to be able to, maybe, I don't know if they're going to have that same level of success again this postseason, but if they can run it, average 4.5 yards per carry, which I think is very possible, plus they have a chance to, blow out SMU in that opening round, in my opinion. Obviously, games are won on the field, not on paper, which is the big key to all of this. But I do not like that matchup for SMU in the trenches.
Yeah, that's where I'm at. I mean, Anthony, you mentioned their quarterback, Kevin Jennings, is a really damn good player. A really good player. Had they gone to him earlier in the season, they probably would have been 12-0 going into that game last night, because I think they would have beat BYU. But it comes down to the trenches. I don't think SMU is going to be able to consistently block Penn State's defensive line. And Penn State's offensive line I think will push them around, and that's where I'm at. Like I think they, you say arguably have the best path. I think they have the best path because in my opinion, Penn State, Oregon, Georgia, Texas, Ohio State are all a step above the rest of the country. And they don't have to beat one of those teams to get to the national championship game, and it wouldn't be to the semifinals. So they got very lucky with this path. I think SMU is a team that they can physically dominate in the trenches. And, this first-round matchup, don't overlook, and I know you kind of hinted at it, Dylan, this team coming up from Dallas to Happy Valley on December 21st, as someone who lives about an hour from State College, I can promise you the weather is going to suck on December 21st. Even if it's dry, it's going to be cold as hell. It's not going to be an enjoyable experience for SMU. And for Penn State, they're used to it. I think that's a big factor too. So there's I know we're 2 weeks out from this thing, but I mean, my early thoughts, and I know you're on the same page, Dylan, Anthony, I'm sure you are as well, that this is a game Penn State probably should win by 10 points, if not more. So I think they've gotten very lucky on the draw, and I think part of it is on a program-wide kind of thing, that this is a great opportunity. This is your chance to seize it. You've got to come out and seize it, but hey, that opportunity's there. You've gotten a good draw. You should be able to push this team around to the trenches. If you're Penn State, I don't think you could be happier with the way this has played out in terms of the seeding.
Yeah, 100% agree. Now, this is an SMU team that you look offensively has been dominant this season. 400-plus yards in 11 of their 13 games, including 458 last night against Clemson. Near almost 3,500 passing yards this season. Almost 2,300 rushing yards. This SMU team is dangerous, but Penn State, they don't have the playmakers that Ohio State has. They don't have the playmakers that Oregon has. I think SMU is going to get their yards in this game. They're going to get some points, but for me, it comes all back to Penn State's offense. If Penn State's offense is even a portion of what it was last night, they're going to be just fine in this game. If now the offense kind of reverts backwards a bit, it'll be a little bit more of a concern. But Penn State's wide receivers at times last night were getting more open than I remember at times this season. I mean, Amari Evans on that one touchdown had nobody around him. And Tyler Warren got open a couple times, which isn't a surprise. It should be an interesting matchup. Defensively, SMU is good, but it should be a defense that Penn State can take advantage of. Anthony, any other thoughts on SMU before we kind of look at Penn State's potential path going forward after that?
No, nothing more on SMU, but I was just going to say, I felt like if anything, Tyler Warren had a little bit of an off night compared to what we normally expect from him. I thought Harrison Wallace played really well, to be honest.
Yeah.
I know it was, the interception at the end, the 50-50 ball, but besides that,
his catch
in the end zone, that showed some toughness right there, and he was coming in a little gimpy to this game. So
yeah,
I was impressed with Wallace. He had another catch on a slant where he took a little bit of a hit and kept going. So yeah, if that Wallace shows up, I think Penn State's got another decent weapon, and Amari Evans has slowly but surely been coming along.
Yeah, so. And be fair to Tyler Warren too. Drew probably cost him about 30, 40 yards and a touchdown in the game too on a couple of those missed passes, especially that one on the first drive of the third quarter. It's obviously last night was not a perfect game for Penn State, but definitely a step in the right direction offensively. It seems like they maybe playing their best offensive football at the right time. But going back to the college football playoff here for Penn State. So if they beat SMU, and like I said in an article today, Penn State has a golden opportunity here to make a run in the college football playoffs, kind of change the narrative of this program. But these games are won on the field, they're not won on paper. Penn State's going to be favored on paper in these first two matchups if they beat SMU. But you still got to win. Now, worth noting, Penn State hasn't lost a game as a favorite. They've lost one game as a favorite over the last 3 seasons. That was to Ole Miss. And one can argue if we knew about the opt-outs and everything else before that game, Penn State's maybe not the favorite in that game. If Penn State beats SMU on December 21st, they'll play on December 31st in the Fiesta Bowl against Boise State, gentlemen. Aston Genty, the Broncos, really good team. But again, this is a game where Penn State, if they make it there, is going to be favored by double digits in that game, 10 to 14 points, in my opinion. Genty obviously is scary, but that's a team that Penn State is widely more talented than. And while Boise State did take Oregon to the wire at the beginning of the season, if those two teams played tomorrow, I don't think that would be the same result. That's another game where I think Penn State matches up well against Boise State, and a game that Penn State, again, should win. Now, I think Boise State may be able to keep that one close, but it's very much a winnable game for Penn State. What do you think, Marty?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Ashton Genty is a beast, obviously, the best running back in the country. But I think, again, first and foremost, you go back to the offense. His offensive line, I think, is a group you expect to be able to push Boise State around. And Ashton Genty is going to get his yards. He's going to get his carries. But outside of Ashton Genty, what about that Boise State team really even concerned you?
Yeah.
And that's no knock on them. I mean, Maddox Matson has come along to be a pretty solid quarterback. But, again, like Boise was they're a group of 5 team. They're a group of 5 team for a reason, and that's not a knock on them. Boise obviously is one of the most consistent programs in the country, Power 5, Group of 5, whatever it is. Otherwise, for 2 or 3 decades now. But that's a game you should win, and I know it sounds silly, and I hate saying these kind of things, but if you play Boise, it's in the Fiesta Bowl, and Penn State has never lost the Fiesta Bowl. There's something about the Fiesta Bowl in Penn State that just clicks.
On the other end, Boise's greatest moment ever is
and the highlight of the Boise State program was in the Fiesta Bowl. I remember being in high school and watching that game with Jeffries, the running back, and the Statue of Liberty and the hook and ladder and everything against Oklahoma. So, I think that would be a good game, but that's a game that I think on paper Penn State should win by double digits. It just, again, things break well for them. This offensive line has played well all year. They played their best game of the season last night. I think a real tip of the cap has got to go to Nolan Rucci, who stepped in for Anthony Donko.
Yeah, really impressive.
And, Rucci, everybody remembers Nolan Rucci's a recruit, the 5-star recruit, Todd Rucci's kid, and last night he looked like that 5-star recruit. If you're going to get that performance from this offensive line, you're going to be capable of beating anybody. And you should push Boise State around in the Fiesta Bowl, assuming it gets to that. And I think, too, if you're Penn State, I know you mentioned it, Dylan, your chance to kind of change the whole perception of the program. I honestly think Penn State, as lucky as they are the way the bracket fell, if they don't get to at least the semis, that opens up a whole other can of worms for James Franklin in this program. I don't think that'll happen. I think they're going to get to the semifinals and probably pretty comfortably. But, yeah, again, Boise State's a team. They're a good football team. Ashton Genty's awesome. He should finish no worse than second in Heisman Trophy voting. But that's a team Penn State should still manage to beat every day of the week.
Yeah, Nolan Rucci, just to bring it up, just one pressure allowed last night against Oregon. And he was facing some pretty good edge rushers there for the Ducks. Anthony, actually going to change this up a little bit for you. As our resident super fan, does the expectation that Penn State should make the semifinals kind of does that cause some nerves for you?
I mean,
that there's this expectation that this Penn State team should, in a month from now, be one win away from contending for a national championship?
A little bit, yeah. I mean, there's always that thought in the back of your mind, like what happens if they get upset? Like, the perception of Penn State is already that they can't win the big game. It would obviously get even worse if they lost to an SMU or a Boise State. But at the same time, you'd rather be in this position than be facing a team like an Oregon or Ohio State where, you're the underdog going into it and you might be one and done, or you're projected to be one and done. So, yeah, obviously that thought lingers. That's why, I think James Franklin, you guys see that video of him taking the team out of the tunnel for the Maryland game, and the man was yelling,
"The lock the F in."
Yes.
I love it.
Yeah, I love it too. And I think that's the mindset that he instills in this team is, we can look ahead as fans, but as the coach, and he really instills, focus on the team in front of you. And I think that's especially important as you go to the college football playoff. And quite frankly, I think that's why Penn State's in this position in the first place. While other teams have fallen, Penn State has stayed the course and paid attention to the team in front of them.
Absolutely. Let's continue on with the big game of hypotheticals. If Penn State beats SMU, and then if Penn State beats Boise State, which they will be favored in both matchups if they get to the Fiesta Bowl. And again, Penn State's only lost one game as a favorite the last 3 years, 32-1 in those games. They will get to a semifinal game in the Orange Bowl against Georgia. I forget what week in January that'd be. I think January 9th, about. I think there's a week between the semifinals and national championship. I believe. Don't quote me on that, but that's what I think off the top of my head. It could be a very interesting Orange Bowl matchup if Penn State gets there, because you could get Georgia, you get Notre Dame, or you get Indiana. Now, I think we could say Indiana is the long shot here. Hoosiers have had a really good season, but the one team they faced that had a heartbeat for the most part, they were thoroughly dominated offensively by Ohio State in that game. That being said, Notre Dame versus Indiana is a terrific opening round matchup. And while I expect Notre Dame to win that game, I can see Indiana pulling off that upset. I'm not sure about you guys, but I could see Indiana doing so. Uh, that being said, I think Penn State matches up well against all three of these teams. Um, and a lot of people are going to say Georgia, that's a team Penn State should be scared about. And sure, that's a damn good team. That's a team that can win the national championship. But the Carson Beck injury changes a lot about the Bulldogs. And, as a lip reader, or for the lip readers out there, when he got injured yesterday and he was talking to one of his teammates on the sidelines talking about the injury, it looked like he said it's bad. And the way he got hit as well makes you wonder if there's a potential UCL tear injury there. And if he has a UCL tear there, his season is over. And while I think Georgia can still be dangerous for Gunnar Stockton, I think if you're Penn State or whoever gets that semifinal matchup against Georgia, or if they make it, or whoever faces them in the national championship, you have to like your chances against Georgia when Carson Beck's not on the field, because Gunnar Stockton has potential, but he also made a really bad mistake late in that game yesterday against Texas that almost cost Georgia the SEC championship. So I do like how Penn State matches up against Georgia. I don't think Georgia has any um, over the top weapons like they have the last few years offensively. And that defense is really good, but I think Penn State can score enough against them to potentially beat them, because I think the defense could slow down Georgia. So, Anthony, we gave it to you last time. Marty, what's your thoughts, I guess, primarily here first on a potential matchup with Georgia?
Yeah, I'm with what you said. I think even if Carson Beck was healthy, I think they're capable of beating Georgia.
Yes.
This is not, the Death Star Georgia that we've seen in recent years, and that's part of what's made this year so great. I mean, to circle back to the post-game show with Greg last night, I said how I think this has been the best season since 2007, and a big part of it is there is no Death Star Georgia, no Death Star Bama like we have seen at times. With Carson Beck, obviously whatever it is pretty severe. The guy could not lift his right arm after he exited the game. I know he came in and handed the ball off on the last play of the game, on the game-winning touchdown. And I was even surprised to see that. I was halfway surprised he was capable of taking a snap and turning around and executing a handoff with how bad it looked. But even with a healthy Beck, he's been a turnover machine this year. And you take him out and put in Gunnar Stockton, like you said, Dylan. I thought for the most part Gunnar Stockton played pretty well yesterday, but
Well,
that
to
one
win.
interception was just mind-boggling. So yeah, I think, again, like I said, this bracket falls well for Penn State. They can beat this Georgia team. And I wouldn't be surprised if in the semifinals it's Notre Dame waiting for them if they get past SMU and Boise and not Georgia. And they're very capable of beating Notre Dame. I think Riley Leonard is not a quarterback that super scares you. That running game is very good, but I'd take my chances there. So yeah, I think they're very capable of beating Georgia. If it's Notre Dame instead of Georgia, which wouldn't surprise me, I think they're very capable of beating the Irish as well. This bracket could not have fallen better for Penn State, and some of that is the injury question marks around Georgia in the quarterback situation, because even if Beck doesn't play, how does that impact how Mike Bobo calls the game, right?
Yeah.
Do they get more conservative? Are they less willing to let Gunnar Stockton kind of grip it and rip it and take a chance, as we've seen them do with Carson Beck at times, even with the turnovers? So yeah, I think it falls really well for Penn State. I think they're very capable of beating Georgia, regardless of the health of Carson Beck. But if you don't have Carson Beck, I think their odds of beating Georgia go up even higher.
Yeah, and obviously big hypotheticals here because Penn State does need to win 2 games, but this episode, the majority of it is just to kind of preview the college football playoff and what could be a potential run for Penn State here, the way the bracket has shaped up for them. Anthony, I'll let you speak on that as well, but I also want to touch on Notre Dame here, Anthony, for you. I think what really makes Notre Dame a good matchup for Penn State is Notre Dame. They're efficient throwing the ball, but that's not a passing attack that is going to be able to take advantage of Penn State's defense like Oregon did last night. They do not have the wide receivers or really even tight end that really scares you this season. If Notre Dame's going to win that game, it would have to be by running for 250, 300 yards. And Penn State's been great against the run all season. I know they gave up 180 yards to Oregon last night, but I thought overall they did a decent job as that game went on, especially of containing that Ducks rushing attack. The overall numbers for the Ducks last night was more of a quantity thing than a quality thing. So what are your thoughts on if Penn State makes the semifinals of their chances against Georgia, Notre Dame, and even Indiana?
Yeah, so I'll start with Georgia. Like Marty said, I agree with a lot of his points. This is a rough time for Georgia to have to transition to a backup quarterback if that is the situation. It looks like it's probable that they'll have to go with Gunnar Stockton the rest of the way based off the context clues. Yeah, he played well enough to win that game, but, he also had some growing pains that you would expect a quarterback in that situation to have. Georgia's got a couple of weeks to try to get him a lot of reps, try to get him right. They have the defense that they can lean on to be able to be okay if they need to roll with him. But, if Notre Dame ends up being the matchup with Georgia in the second round, that's going to be a really good test for Georgia and their offense to see if they're capable of advancing and being a national championship contender with Gunnar Stockton at quarterback. I think
if I may add quickly, just from our UGA side, Kirby Smart today said Carson Beck coming back from his MRI into the team meetings was somber but excited for his teammates. So that the somber thing especially makes me think that it is a season-ending injury here for Carson Beck.
I expect them to lean on the running game, especially like Trevor Etienne.
Yeah.
And Nate Frazier, if that's the direction they have to go, the offense. But
right.
Notre Dame, a lot of old heads that have a lot of fun with that matchup. Notre Dame obviously hasn't really played Penn State in recent history, but that was a big rivalry back in the day before certainly before me and Dylan were born. Marty might remember the old days a little bit.
I mean, Marty, last time these two teams met was 07, maybe? 08, maybe?
Sorry, yeah, if I can stop sneezing. No, I remember that last group, the last pairing between them very well. As someone who grew up in Pennsylvania, surrounded by Penn State fans, as a Penn State fan, but went to a Catholic high school, I was also surrounded by Notre Dame fans. That is a rivalry that is legit. It is part of the reason why Notre Dame and Pitt is also a legit rivalry, because in the state of Pennsylvania, there are a lot of Catholics. So there's a lot of people who root for Notre Dame based on that, and then you throw in the state schools. As someone who remembers that well, I remember the Derek Williams punt return. It was a blast that night at Beaver Stadium. It was the first full stadium whiteout as well when they played Notre Dame last. I would love to see it for nostalgia, for family members of mine who are Notre Dame fans, that just growing up around as many Notre Dame fans as I did, I think drove me to not be able to root for the Irish. I would love to see it. I mean, I know I'm not that much older than you guys. I'm older enough to be able to remember the very tail end of that rivalry in the early 2000s and what it was and what it means to a lot of people. It would be really cool to see. I think that's also a game that if it would come to that in the semifinals, that's a game Penn State's very capable of winning. Honestly, if you're Penn State, I know that even with the quarterback injury situation in Georgia, you probably still would prefer not to face Georgia just because the rest of that roster is so talented. If you get a semifinals matchup against Penn or against Notre Dame, you feel very good about your chances, and it would be cool, as you guys mentioned, the rivalry that was between the two up until and through the early 2000s when they played last. It would be it'd be a fun game. It'd be a really fun game, and it would be a fun time for a lot of fan bases and things of that nature in the state of Pennsylvania as well.
Yeah. Last matchup, September 8th, 2007, 31-10 win for Penn State. But going back to you, Anthony, what's your other thoughts on Notre Dame? But again, personally, I think that matches up well for Penn State in a potential matchup. Notre Dame's strength playing into Penn State's strength there. Uh, Penn State could really force Notre Dame to go potentially one-dimensional in that game as well, and I think that would play really in favor of Penn State. But what's your other thoughts on the potential semifinal matchups?
Yeah, I mean, Penn State and Notre Dame have been linked a lot the last few weeks. Obviously, their position in the rankings has been, one right after the other. A lot of debates, should Notre Dame jump Penn State? Obviously, they did not, and I think that was the right decision at the end of the day. They're a team that obviously has gotten better throughout the course of the year. I think they're a much different team now than they were in the first half of the year. Obviously, they have that really, really bad loss on their resume to Northern Illinois back in week 2, and I think that has been the major roadblock for them in terms of potentially jumping us. I think they have the better wins on their schedule. They beat down on the military schools for whatever that's worth. They beat USC by 2 scores. And there's a better win. They beat Louisville, which was a decent win. So they have some good wins in there as well. But that loss was just too much to overcome for them. Obviously, they didn't play in a conference title game. Not in a conference, that is another case. But their offense kind of goes through Jeremiah Love. I think he's a tremendous running back, might be the top running back in this NFL draft class, outside of maybe Ashton Genty. He's really, really good. And if Penn State is going to win that game, and I think they're very capable of doing so if it got to that point, stopping Jeremiah Love would be priority number 1 for defense. I think Riley Leonard's gotten better as the year goes on, but like you said, I don't think he's somebody that you're overly worried about. Like, he doesn't necessarily scare you, but he can make enough plays, and he's mobile with his legs, which is his calling card. So you have to be able to keep him in the pocket and force him into some mistakes if it got to the point.
Well said, and I think we all agree that Penn State would be a pretty decent favorite over Indiana, and would probably win that matchup as well. But yeah, it'll be interesting to see what happens if Penn State gets to semifinals. Who would they face? Because the Notre Dame Georgia quarterfinal matchup could be really interesting. But a long ways to go there. Over a month until that point, almost about a month until that point. So we'll have to wait and see. And then obviously the national championship, I don't want to go too much just because there's a ton of teams there. But you look at the other side of the bracket in Ohio State, Tennessee, Arizona State, Texas, Clemson, and Oregon. Obviously, we saw what Penn State's done against Ohio State and Oregon, but in a one-game, national championship, all bets are off the table in that scheme at that time, and I think Penn State could truly beat anybody coming out the other side if they play their best game when it matters. But I think my last thoughts here is Penn State has been given a golden opportunity in this playoff to make a run for a national championship. I think the expectation needs to be at least to make the semifinals. And depending on what matchup you get in that semifinal matchup, a trip to national championship might be a fair expectation as well. But getting to that semifinal matchup, I think, is an absolute must for this program to kind of show that they are a program to be taken seriously in the college football landscape going forward. Because if they lose to SMU or Boise State, like Marty said earlier, it is only going to be the narrow, or maybe it was Anthony, but the narrative that Penn State can win the big game is only going to continue. So any final thoughts on the playoffs or Penn State's path?
I ultimately think the committee got it right. I think they ranked every team as they should have been ranked based off the parameters that were given. I'm glad SMU stayed in and Alabama stayed out. I think that was the correct decision. SMU played Clemson really close in a game that was decided by a field goal. They should not have been punished by being out of the playoff. like I said, I think the committee did a pretty good job. I think the committee, or not the committee, the bracket in general is going to change over the next year or two. I think they will eventually get rid of the conference champions get a bye stipulation. I think it'll just be the best 12 teams. And I also think at some point they will change it so that they reseed after every round. So, for example, big debate of Oregon has a harder path than Penn State, and they beat Penn State, and I totally understand that argument, to be fair with you. I think they'll change it so that the number one seed always plays the lowest seed in the next round and going on down. And I think that's the two ways that you can make this bracket better. But overall, I think it's great, and I think these matchups are fun, and I think, like you said, Penn State has a golden opportunity. I'm fully bought into the one game at a time mentality, so SMU is the full focus as much as we talk about other teams. But also, Penn State, if they don't at least get to the semifinals, it will be considered a bit of a failure, even though they made the playoff for the first time ever.
Yeah, I think at the absolute least, you have to beat SMU. If they lose the home playoff game to SMU, it's going to be not a fun time for James Franklin. Marty, final thoughts on the playoff before we quickly just talk about transfer portal opening up.
No, I agree with everything Anthony said. I think the 12-team playoff was great. The one thing I want to see change, and he mentioned it, is taking the NFL model of reseeding after each round, because there is no reason why the number one overall seed should be, pigeonholed into playing the winner of Ohio State and Tennessee in the second round. But yeah, golden opportunity for Penn State as a program. Dylan, I know you said you think they got to beat at least SMU. I think they have to get to at least the semifinals.
Yeah,
I truly believe that because of how the bracket is. If they were seeded differently, let's say they were the 5 and Texas was the 6. I might feel a little bit different because you got to deal with Clemson and then Arizona. But no, I think you've got to get at least to the semifinals if you're Penn State. And if you don't, that narrative of just James and not winning the big game, what this program is, and to an extent, rightfully so, the narrative is not going to go.
You are as good as your record says you are.
Yes. But this is their chance to buck a lot of that. This is their chance to get the program trending upward in a big direction. But you got to come out and execute. You got to do it. I think they're going to do it. I think they're going to get to at least the semis. And I think they have to. But, yeah, it's going to be a frantic and crazy and exciting couple of weeks here around Penn State football.
Last thing for both of you. Quick one-word answer. Is a national championship realistic for Penn State in the 2024-25 playoffs? Marty, yes or no?
Yeah.
Anthony?
I think they can get there, but I still don't think it's realistic.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
This team can be.
Let me ask you this: if it's anybody besides Oregon,
yes. Although if it was
so you just don't think they can beat Oregon?
I don't know if they can beat Ohio State either, believe it or not. But
that's fair. They haven't in 8 years.
I think Oregon and Ohio State are still the two best teams in the country, despite the fact that Ohio State's the 8th seed. It's great that they're going to knock each other out, but I do think one of those teams ends up winning it all at the end of the day.
I've been saying all year that for me, the answer is yes. I think it's realistic for Penn State to win a national championship, though they would have to defy expectations based off previous top matchups. But I've been saying all year that I thought Penn State could beat anybody in the country outside of maybe Oregon, Ohio State, Texas, and Georgia. And if Penn State's going to win a national championship, they're probably going to have to beat 2 of those teams. So that's I think it's realistic, but I think it's very much matchup dependent in the national championship as well. But right now, heading to the playoffs, the only team that I think I would absolutely pick against Penn State right now is Oregon. So we'll just have to wait and see. But golden opportunity for Penn State over the next month or so here in the college football playoffs, starting December 21st at Beaver Stadium. By the way, a whiteout. We didn't mention that, but a whiteout. That's another factor to add into that game, even if it's a new kick. All right, transfer portal opens on Monday. James Franklin already said he's told his staff to be aggressive. We know that they're going to be shopping for a wide receiver. Everybody, if I went on Twitter right now and said, what position do you want Penn State to target in the transfer portal? It would be wide receiver, wide receiver, wide receiver. It would be wide receiver for 100 replies. but Penn State has other needs in the portal this year. So I guess just both of you, what are some positions that you want to see Penn State maybe target a little bit aggressively alongside wide receiver? Um, is it defensive end? Is it safety? Is it offensive line depth? Is it running back? Is it another cornerback? What is it? Anthony, I guess I'll go with you first.
Yeah, I think it's got to be edge rusher. Yeah, wide receivers obviously everyone's number one priority, but honestly, the edge rusher situation for next year might be just as important. Obviously, Abdul Carter's going to the NFL. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. I fully believe that they will present a nice offer to deny Dennis Sutton to come back for another year, and
as they should.
They will see if he bites on that, to be determined. But other than that, there's a lot of question marks. Vanover will be gone. Smith-Vilbert is an interesting situation because with the injury he had, he technically could get an injury waiver and come back for another year. So it'll be interesting to see if he pursues that or if he says, you know what, I've done 6 years in college. I'm ready to move on from this. Wouldn't blame him either way. You'll get Zariah Fisher back next year. And you've got Granville and Jalen Harvey, who could be really, really good. But you need at least one other guy in there that you can bring in and trust him to be a productive starter, because otherwise that edge situation drops off a cliff. I think defensive tackle will be important to bring in one, at the very least for depth, but Zane Durant's not a guarantee to come back, so you need to get at least one defensive tackle as well. Safety, potentially, if KJ Winston, Jalen Reed, both are gone. You need someone opposite Wheatley.
Well, I think could have a big year next year, by the way.
Who?
I think Wheeler could have a big year next year.
Absolutely. But, is DeJuan Lane ready to be that second guy? What do you have beyond those two? So I think
that's where it comes from me is I like the room overall, but it's an inexperienced room heading into next year outside of Wheeler.
Yeah, and then, again, sticking with defense, I think that's the biggest priority. Linebacker is another one. We'll see what happens with Coach.
Yeah.
You get him back. You still have Tony Rojas. You get Keon Wiley, Tamir Robinson. So there's some decent players in there, but do they bring in somebody? I know a guy like Josiah Trotter just went in the portal. Do they give him a look? What other names pop in? I think they'll be looking at linebacker as well, potentially, to see what names pop in there for depth reasons.
Yeah, all great points. Good. You talk about NFL draft guys, potentially. Good to point out here that if Penn State's season ends before January 6th, the soft deadline would be January 6th for those guys to declare. There's a special eligibility deadline for January 15th, and then anybody who makes the national championship game has until January 24th. Marty, thoughts on the portal? Where do you think Penn State needs to go?
Well, first and foremost, Anthony stole all my talking points. I know everyone's going to point at wide receiver. I don't think wide receiver is number one priority in the portal. I really don't. I think it's the defensive line because this defensive line is really damn good. A big reason why Penn State, when you asked me, do I think they're capable of winning the national championship this year, and I said yes. A big reason why is this defensive line, and this defensive line is about to get gutted by the draft. To circle back to receiver quickly, Trey Wallace should be back. I think Tysier Denmark is going to be very, very good, potentially as soon as next year. I think Peter Gonzalez, if he were healthy, we may already see him making an impact this year. I think Matthew Otten coming in January is a guy who can make an impact next year. So I think a receiver, you're going to have enough pieces, and that goes out mentioning this tight end room that with what they've already got and with Matt Henderson and Andrew Olish coming in, is just ridiculously good. I think defensive line needs to be your top priority because you don't necessarily. A receiver, you've got enough guys here with talent that you think you probably can piece something together. You don't feel that way necessarily about defensive line. They've got some really talented guys in the room, but you need bodies, you need experience, you need depth. I think defensive tackle, defensive end, just defensive line in general is your number one priority in the portal. Ahead of wide receiver. I think safety, as Anthony hit on, is also very important. This safety group has been tremendous this year. Jalen Reed, in my opinion, has played at an All-American level. He's going to be playing on Sundays next year. You mentioned Zakee Wheatley. I'm with you, Dylan. I think Wheatley could have a really good year for them next year, but you've got to supplement that. Is Day Lane ready? We don't know. He's got all the physical tools. He's got a lot of athleticism. But is he going to be ready to consistently make an impact? Does Zion Tracy or an Antoine Belgrave Shorter move to safety full time this offseason? We don't know. I think that's where bringing in a safety could make a big difference as well. But again, to me, looking ahead, going into the offseason, the number one priority in the transfer portal is defensive line, even ahead of receiver, and I think safety is right there in that conversation as well. And then from there, you're always going to look for offensive linemen. You're always going to take a look at kickers and punters. Maybe a veteran running back for depth if both Nicholas Singleton and Katron Allen are gone. But yeah, to me, it's defensive line above everything else, and then wide receiver, and then safety.
You guys touch all the points there. I'm not going to add anything to that. So yeah, we'll see what Penn State does. Portal opens up on Monday, and it is going to be a very fast-moving couple of weeks here in the portal. You guys are obviously going to want to be on campus early January. I actually do not know off the top of my head right now when Penn State's spring semester gets underway, but I'll check on that as soon as this wraps up. But yeah, it's going to be moving fast the next couple of weeks. Visitors are going to be on campus or can be on campus as soon as, I believe, tomorrow. I'm not saying there's going to be, but just that things will move faster. Penn State has already been connected to a few transfer portal players, so we'll see what happens there. Be sure to stay tuned at Happy Valley Insider, PennState.rivals.com for all the inside information on the transfer portal for Penn State. But until next time, everybody, my name is Don't Count Curly. He's Marty Leap of Happy Valley Insider, and our resident super fan, Anthony, is on. We'll be back with you, I'm sure, shortly to discuss Penn State and the transfer portal. Penn State basketball continues to have a hot start to their season. And, of course, we have to continue to preview the 2024-25 college football playoffs as Penn State looks to make their run for glory this postseason. But until then, everybody, enjoy the rest of your week. Enjoy what hopefully will be a nice December here leading up to the college football playoffs. And we'll talk to you all real soon.